Welcome, welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I'm Mary Crafts, and what are we here for? You remembered. We're here to craft our lives into something meaningful, something purposeful. And when I think about what I am going to say or what guest I'm going to have on, that's exactly the filter that I use. Will this person help me craft a better life? Will this help a person bring enough insight to me, enough profound thought to me that I will move the needle down the road? And that's how I kind of decide. And so when I thought about today, I thought, one of the things I've been thinking about is the ripple effect that my book is going to have. And I thought, oh my gosh, who better to have on this podcast than the person whose website is called The Ripple Effect. Welcome, Kandace Dato. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Mary. I'm glad to be here today.
Oh, Kandace, I'm going to tell people just a little bit about you. You and I have actually been close friends for 4 or 5 years, and we kind of knew of each other off in the distance before that. But as I was kind of nearing the end of my career, I began to kind of, have different events and awards and different things. And I would just reach out and throw an invitation out to my friends. And if it stuck, they came. And if it didn't, they didn't. And the one thing I learned about you is that you showed up. It was a long drive from Park City down to Utah County. And you showed up. You came.
Yeah.
And that's how you are for people. And that's one of the things I love about what you do with people and how you work for people. You are not just there for this self piece. You're there to show up for others.
Absolutely.
So I would like you to start by telling my listeners a little bit about yourself, kind of like where you came from, how you got to this point, and where you're going over here.
Perfect. So I spent a good 23 plus years in corporate America doing the IT, telecommunications space, building and creating sales teams. And in 2004, I stepped out of corporate America and set up my own company. I actually set up 3 different companies, one in IT, one in marketing, and one in kind of a human resources payroll role. So interesting, I got to wear lots of different hats. And in the last 4 years or so, I have just had this strong urge to give back. I've done enough on the career side. I've done enough on the money side. What can I do now that I can change or impact people's lives and create a better world and a better place through that? And so I'm kind of out there sharing my story, doing coaching, corporate and individual and team coaching, and I absolutely love it.
I think you and I both know the day I'm talking about when I share this story. Kandace and I are in the same circle, so that's a close group of women that get together every other week to circle up and support each other and really have a time to be safe with each other. I remember when you were in Katie's living room and sitting on the end of the sofa. I could see it like it was yesterday. And you were just kind of like, couldn't stay comfortable in your seat. You're moving all around. And finally somebody said, "What's going on over there?" And you said, "Well, I'm really being drawn over here, but gee, I don't know if there's any money over there. And I'm really good at this. It's safe. I know the space, but I feel like a huge piece of me is just going, get over here." And you were afraid. You had some fear stuff. And you pushed through that and you let go. Wow. And when you did that you could just see it. Wow, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And look where you are today, 4 years later.
Yeah. And it wasn't easy, that fear space. It took me, I would say 30 days at least to get through some mental blocks that I had that allowed me to release the fear and have the courage to step forward. It wasn't like, oh, bam, I wake up one day and there's no fear and I'm going to go do this. It takes some soul searching and some real good self conversations to get through that fear, to get through the mental block. Then you can emerge on the other side. Yeah. And I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I didn't stay in the seat of fear and keep me where I was at.
And I think that one of the other things that people, when they look at people who have, created their own companies, which you did several times, and stepped out into a different space, and they think, oh, wow, they were born different than me. the truth of the matter is that we all have those fears and that we
Yes.
all work through them to take the step. But the truth of the matter, Candace, also is we're like alcoholics. It's not like those fears never come back to us again. Like you
Exactly.
can wake up one morning and go like, I've had several of those moments in the last little bit. And I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Well, I mean, I could be sipping tequila out in the Bahamas. What the heck am I doing?
Yeah.
But we have more skills now
Yeah,
to recognize the fears and keep stepping in and stepping in. So share with
absolutely.
us what it is now that you have stepped into that is your actual calling, your mission, your vision of what is your purpose in this life.
I think my purpose in this life, Mary, is to share my story, to motivate and inspire others that
Yeah.
no matter what circumstances you may have been in, no matter how long or how committed you've been to your mistakes, it's never too late to start over, to do something new, and to become your most beautiful and best self.
Yeah.
And, my story shares that from 17 up until right now, all those challenges and blocks and fears and bad choices and all the things that came. And then what emerges on the other side if you don't live as a victim, if you
Mm.
choose to own your circumstances as the creator of those circumstances, and then get outside of that and know that you're not a bad person, you just made some bad choices, and that you can create the life that you want. And so I think my purpose is to share that story,
Mm.
where I was and where I am today, and stepping through all of the fears, blocks, and challenges to become that. And I hope to inspire, as many people as I can, young people as I can, to do that. And I do feel that that is my purpose and calling through lots of
Yeah.
modalities, through individual, personal and team coaching, through group coaching, through I'm like you, an aspiring author. I want to get my story out. I would love to do more and share through podcasting. So there's lots of goals that I still have, even at
Yeah.
52. There's still many
Oh,
things I
honey,
need
you're
to step
just a
outside of
baby.
my
You're
fear.
just a baby. So just settle in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's always opportunity, there's always vision, and you're absolutely a mentor for me to let me know that no
Yeah.
matter how old you are, or no matter how good you've been at something, there's always a new adventure and something new waiting. And I love that about you.
Well, the one thing that I pound like a drum, whether it's in my book or when I speak somewhere, are the two things. And one is that it's never too late. It's never too
Yeah,
late. And two is that nothing is impossible with the right
yeah,
mindset. Your
yeah,
company now is called The Ripple Effect.
yeah,
And I absolutely love that because when I think about when I do speaking engagements and keynotes, I reach a limited number of people, all profound, not that I'm not great at that, but a
yeah,
limited number. And so then I started podcasting and now I reach a few more people and then they
hmm,
recommend me to people and then you kind of grow on that.
yeah,
But now that I have a book that can be actually purchased and shared with your neighbor or someone you know that's struggling, or that can be just simply miss some of the pitfalls and cliffs that I went off,
yeah, yeah,
then it's like a ripple effect. It's just me, but you drop that stone in the water
yeah,
and the ripple effect can happen. So tell me
right.
exactly what your company does and how the ripple effect applies to you.
Perfect. Well, first of all, I want to tell you that that ripple effect can't start unless we choose to be vulnerable. So the fact that you put your book out and I'm sharing my story, that's an incredible vulnerability that starts that first stone, because it's often easy to stand behind our success or who we are today
Yeah.
and all the things we've accomplished. And oftentimes we almost don't want people to know where we came from or what our challenges were. We want them to see us for who we are in this moment.
Hmm.
So for me, the first step is vulnerability, being willing to step outside your comfort zone and talk about the hard subjects, talk about the things that no one wants to talk about, and share those stories. So that's the first ripple effect of that. And then how I started in this, it was so interesting, and why I use the ripple effect is my daughter's boyfriend had shared a podcast with me, much like what we're doing right now. And I watched this podcast, and it was an Ed Milet, and he had Jay Shetty on the
Oh,
podcast. And I knew immediately as I was exploring doing coaching and um, going into this modality, I sat there and immediately said, that's who I'm going to model. I love his
I do too.
story. I love his
I do
philosophy.
too.
I love where he came from. I'm going to do that. So then I spent a year training in his coaching certification program, but I
Ah,
would never have known. Maybe I would have come across Jay Shetty later, but I would never have known that unless that podcast hadn't been shared with me and I hadn't taken the time to watch. And that's the ripple effect that creates this
mhm.
amazing wake of goodness from just one person daring to share.
Yeah. And now I don't follow a lot of people's daily posts because sometimes it just gets a little much and I get tired of watching
Yeah.
people dancing on camera. But Jay Shetty, that's and if you guys want to follow him, Jay
Yes.
Shetty, Shetty, every single
Okay.
day, in fact, multiple times a day, he
Yeah.
posts stuff that just is like, duh. I
Yeah.
need to step into that. I want to step into that. I'm
Yeah.
called to that. So you should follow him. You know that Candace and I are watching all the time, whatever
Yeah.
he's doing.
Yeah.
And
He's
so
fantastic.
from doing Jay's, they were not a retreat; they were classes. What?
Yeah, you sign up, and one of the things you taught as a coach is time integrity. So you sign up and pay all your money to do his certification program, and you do it at home individually,
Okay.
and but you have 1 year to complete it, and that's it. You have to make a commitment. So it's not something that you can sign up for, and 6 years later, I finally finished it,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
I love because his group practices what they teach or what they coach, and one
yeah,
of those concepts is time integrity. So I thought, oh, I'm going to fly through this in 4 months. I'm going to go through this. It'll be so easy. It took me every bit of that full entire year down to the very last minute to complete all the coursework, all the reflections, all the testing that you have to do after each module. And at the end of that year, I just sat down like, wow, that was intense. But you know what it did? It prepared me to have a coaching framework to help other people. And I'm so glad I did that.
One of my dear friends and your friend too, Katie, uh, signed up and did your most recent coaching retreats.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if it was coaching retreat, it was something else. What was the?
So Katie did, I have a 12-week summer program. It's called the Changemaker series, and it's
Yeah.
once a week for about an hour and a half over 12 weeks. And we tackle a different concept that builds upon each other over those 12 weeks.
So when Katie first signed up, she Marco Poloed me and said, I'm doing this for Candace. I really want to support her. I hope I have time to do this, blah, blah. And then the next week it was like, hey, she was really good last week. And I'm kind of excited to jump on this week. And then the next week it was like, oh my gosh, Mary, Candace is amazing. She is so good at this. And this is from a woman who, like you and I, travel in these spaces and have been to
Yeah.
these things before. And Katie saw you as a whole different level.
Wow.
So a great testimonial to you and what you're
Brilliant.
doing and how you have fully stepped into this. So what
Yeah.
else are you doing?
So I do a couple of different things. So not only do I do two 12-week change makers, once in the summer and once in the winter, I also do mini retreats. So I do one on forgiveness that's really important to me. I think forgiveness is the one piece and the critical key to our overall happiness. So I do a forgiveness retreat, and I've got some other mini retreats coming up. I can share, having been twice divorced and having been a single mom, I'm doing, and now having been in a major blended family, I'm doing some mini retreats on divorce and the blended family, which I'm super
Wow.
excited about
Yeah.
coming up. I do motivational speaking, and I also am doing a lot of group and team coaching inside of companies. So one of my superpowers, if you will, over the 23 years was creating really successful and synergistic sales teams.
Mm.
And so I said, well, that's a superpower. Why am I not giving those pieces of coaching that I have and then bringing it into the corporate environment or small to mid-sized business environment and coaching sales teams? So I do that as well.
I love that. So you're
Yeah.
using things that you've mastered in the past, things that you're mastering in the present, and leaning in and stepping into things that you know are part of you in the future. I love
Yeah,
all of
absolutely.
those steps. I am so tired of that catch-all phrase that people are using now everywhere, and they've been using it now for about 5 years, and it says, yeah, just lean into it. Just lean into it. I'm like, you're not going to get anywhere by just leaning in.
Yeah,
You have to step in. You have
yeah,
to allow it to fully embrace you, and you have to believe in yourself enough, not just to put your
yeah,
toe in there, but to
yes,
step into it.
yeah.
And that's what you've done, babe.
Yeah, and I love giving that back too, Mary, because it's giving people the toolbox. So you're right. You
Yeah,
can't lean in if you don't have enough tools in your toolbox. You can lean in, but then what?
right.
So giving them some tools, some new concepts, some new ways to think about themselves and how they want to show up and contribute to their own success, their own happiness, their own way that they get to be in the world. It's a lot of responsibility, but once you do that, beautiful things follow.
So I want to spend some time this morning talking about this concept, this retreat that you do so well, of
Yeah,
forgiveness.
yeah,
I was thinking about this in my own life just this past week about what are the things that I'm still holding on to. And that is the concept that came to me. I'm pretty good at forgiving others, but it's
hmm,
still existing in my life because I haven't forgiven me. And so I really spent some time just alone, quietly thinking, what pieces haven't I forgiven myself for? And I didn't have to think very long.
yeah,
They were
yeah,
just brought up to me. I could see them. Oh, there was this. I'm still holding on to that. I'm still hiding that because why? I'm hiding it because I haven't forgiven myself. So I don't
yeah,
think anyone else can forgive me. And I thought of two or three things that just were like, those are weighing me down. I have to find the right audience in the right place so that I can step into that and forgive myself
yeah.
and let go of that. How do you walk people through that process?
Well, the first thing we do in my 12-week Changemaker series is number one, first week, we talk about self love and self
Um,
care. Because if you don't love yourself, it's going to be really hard to forgive yourself.
yeah.
So we start there first, and then we move into boundaries, and then we move into forgiveness as a little bit further down the road because we want to get some, again, put some tools in the toolbox to get us to that point where we can forgive. I think
Mm,
self forgiveness is the most difficult for everyone. And if we don't, all we're doing is instilling guilt and shame into our unconscious mind.
mm.
And we don't want to carry that, right?
No,
We don't
we
want to
don't.
carry guilt and shame.
I don't want to carry it anymore. Yeah.
No. You know, we are all really good people. We just sometimes make bad choices, but we always strive to do the best we can with the resources available to us in that moment. So as you look
Good.
back and you go, okay, I have this thing that I want to forgive myself for, rather than judging yourself or being harsh with yourself or having that guilt and shame, is giving yourself some grace. I did the best I
Yeah.
could with what I knew at the time.
Yeah.
Now, how do I let that go and move on?
I was pretty clear for quite a while that at whatever stage and how badly I seemed to be fumbling, I knew I was doing my best at that
Yeah,
moment in time. And that was such a relief to let go of that guilt and that perfectionism. But there still seemed to be something hanging on. And I
yeah,
just was not sure what it was until I thought about what instances haven't I forgiven myself for? And I got very specific.
yeah,
And there they came, right
yeah,
up.
yeah.
So how do you think people discover the things that need to be forgiven by themselves?
I think it takes a person being able and willing to go within and to look at themselves in a way that is uncomfortable.
Mm,
Oftentimes, we stay busy being busy, which is a typical trauma response for if I stay busy doing all these things, then I don't have to look at myself and I don't have to acknowledge some of my
Mm.
mistakes or some of the things that I've done. You also have to get past limiting beliefs. The belief that if you did X, that makes you Y.
Ah,
That's a limiting belief that we have, right? So it's these little tools that you have to start with that says, I'm a good person. I did the best that I could. I'm willing to, the harder one, get over the shame or the guilt, because we want people to see us as we are right now. We spend an awful lot of time putting up that facade in front of us so that people see us as we want to present ourselves, but not who we truly are. And it's just that recognition that how other people receive you is not your responsibility. The only thing that
yeah.
matters is how you receive yourself.
And
Um,
others are not going to accept you for as you are and who you are until that. It's an energetic thing. People can feel when there's
Absolutely.
hiding going on. I,
Yes.
there's just a sense about it. This person's not being completely upfront with me. There's something that they're holding, they're hiding. And
Yeah.
sometimes people refer to that as intuition. Some people refer to it as a gut response. I think it's the heart intuition where the gut and the
Yes.
mind get together here in the middle, in the heart, and say,
Yes.
there's something not quite right here.
Yeah.
And it's not just
Yeah.
a prejudice rejection. And it's not a mind game where you think, oh, I know that look, blah, blah,
Yeah.
But it's when you bring those things together in your heart,
Yeah.
then you have this intuition that says, yeah, something's not quite right there. When you sense that with others, do you feel like that is something that should be acted on or felt into? Or do you feel like that's something more to just wait until they are in that space? What do you do with that piece?
I think for me, I would generally wait until someone was in that space, but I would probably plant some nuggets or some seeds, letting them know that they had a safe environment, that it was safe for them
Yeah.
to let go or to share, and that there was no judgment. And so it's just planting the little seeds to let them know they're safe. And, as we were talking, I was thinking back to even some of my own self forgiveness. And I had made some, I wouldn't say great decisions earlier in my life, maybe in my late 20s. And not too long ago, I knew that this particular person or a few of these people were still upset at me because of the decision that I had made.
Uh,
And I had already done all of the work to get myself to a point to do the self forgiveness. And it was an interesting conversation because I said to them, hey, I can sense or I feel that there's still some anger or there's still some harsh feelings or there's something. And I just want you to know that I've done the work to forgive myself and I've moved on. I am out here living my very best life. And yet you're holding on to something that
hmm.
I did when I was 29 and I'm 52. I said, that's an awful long time to carry me on your back. And it hasn't done anything for you except to keep you in this space of judgment and anger and
Yeah.
sadness or whatever that might be. I said, but I'm out here living my best life. And I think that's the biggest misconception about forgiveness is that somehow hanging on to it, either for ourselves or towards someone else, does something for us good. And it doesn't.
Yeah.
There is no good that comes from hanging on to unforgiveness.
Hmm. Such a profound thing. I wish people would like stop and think about that again. Write that, jot that
Yeah.
down on a piece of paper, and then spend some time later thinking about
Yeah.
that. Who am I still holding on to? It's easy now
Yeah.
for me to see my own, but who am I still holding on to?
Yeah.
It doesn't serve me. It doesn't
No.
serve them. They're moved
No.
on. They don't care that you're still upset with them.
Right. Well, and the other misconception is that if you forgive, that means that you exonerate the other person or you make that what they did that hurt you in some way okay. That's a misconception. The idea behind forgiveness is to let it go, become right with yourself, but you always retain the deeper learnings. So it's not forgive and forget only. It's forgive, but retain the deeper learning and then move on. So if you have a conversation about that thing or that event later, it's in a spirit of what did I learn from that? And oh my gosh, you can almost giggle about it. That was so bad, but I will never do that again because this is what I learned from it. So it's this process that can be actually pretty liberating for the person that is doing the forgiving. And
Yeah.
I just think most people get it so backwards is they are just going to make you pay one way or another, and the only person that pays is themselves.
I had a recent, I mean, very recent experience where someone came to me and I was the one that they felt I needed to give them forgiveness. And so they recounted this whole story to me. And I listened and I thought about my response and what did I feel about what they were saying. And when they were done telling me, I said, and what have you learned from this experience? Where has it brought you to?
Yeah.
And then they shared that with me. And I said, when I first got involved with this, I didn't know that that was going to be my opportunity. But if someone had said, Mary, would you give X, Y, and Z to help this soul move through life and learn his lessons? And I thought, yeah, I would have. And I got the opportunity to share that with them and say, I'm so blessed to have this opportunity to not only forgive you, but to see it as a gift that I was able to give, to forgive you so that you can move on. I can move on without a doubt,
Absolutely.
but I freed
Yeah.
them and that they were
It's
able
those
to move
deeper
on.
learnings that are powerful, and you got that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt it was much
Yeah.
like, it's why one of Les Mis continues to be one of my favorite stories because, in so many moments I want to break out, and I've bought your soul for God. When the priest forgives Jean Valjean
Yeah.
and he says,
Yeah.
I'm forgiving you. I'm not turning you into the police so that you can take this lesson and go on and
Yeah.
live a magnificent life. And
Absolutely.
that's one of the most powerful pieces in that story. And certainly Jean Valjean takes that piece and does go on to live this amazing life of service and lifting.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say the other piece to forgiveness that I think people don't realize is there are three types of forgiveness that have to occur. And the first one is when you have no idea that something was wrong. So if you've ever had someone come to you 3 or 4 years later and say, that one time in that one meeting, you said this and this and this, and I was so hurt by that. I've been hurt for 5 years, and you're looking them in the eye going, I have no idea what you're talking about.
I have had
Right?
that, yes.
Right. So that's that one piece where you have to have this forgiveness. The other piece is when we overreact to something. So we could be in a situation and then we overreact to something that someone did or said. We go home and 2 days later we're going, oh my gosh, why did I react that way? That was terrible. I should never have said that. I shouldn't have done that. That's some self forgiveness work that has to happen, and maybe to ask for forgiveness for those that you overreacted for and with. There's the third type where there was malintent. Someone did do something intentionally to harm or hurt you in some way, or even yourself in some way. And then that takes a little bit more work to get through that forgiveness. But if you kind of break those up into those chunks, it makes it a little easier for you to look at it and see what has to be done. What do I need to do, and how do I let this go? So I love to let people know there's all kinds of forgiveness that needs to happen every day.
I love that because it's not just a one-time process. Oh yeah, I've forgiven
Mm-hmm.
you or that person. I forgive everybody or I forgive myself
Yeah.
one time and we're
Yeah.
done now. Let's
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah.
But it is an everyday thing. So many, whether
It is.
somebody cuts you off in traffic or whether a family member says something that is like
Yeah.
a knife to your heart. It's
Yeah.
it's an everyday thing that we get an opportunity to step into.
Absolutely. And when you practice it, the more you practice forgiveness, you can actually gain trait for forgiveness. So you actually will become a natural forgiving person. And, you made a good point about being cut off in traffic. Back when my daughter was in junior high school, I had to drive to a volleyball game, and Ogden, and I had no idea where I was going. And the more I was trying to find her, the school that she was at, the more stressed out I became. And so I had cut someone off in traffic, not
Yeah.
completely by accident. It was that first forgiveness piece, which is I had no idea, and it was so unintentional. And that woman that I cut off was so upset by that that she actually pulled up behind me in a stoplight, got out of her car. I unrolled my window, which I shouldn't have done, and she physically assaulted me
Oh my gosh.
all over a very little thing that she could have easily have just chosen to forgive that. Like this, you see other people, and I understand I wouldn't mean to do
Yeah.
that. I wouldn't do that intentionally. So how just have that quick forgiveness and move on instead of letting it ruin the whole day or the whole night.
Hmm.
That's how bad it can become if we choose not to have forgiveness for the little things, including the huge things.
It's crazy because in that instance you just talked about, just think of what that did to her that day.
Oh yeah.
She could have, like you said, just go, she must be in a hurry. Nah. But
Yep.
instead, her reaction set her tone for probably the rest of the day. And
Oh
she
yeah.
just stayed in that ugly space of like really what I call paranoia. Everyone's out to get me. I'm a victim.
Yeah.
I'm a victim and I'm
Yeah.
going to stand up for myself. And this is how I stand up for
Yeah.
me when I'm a victim. And
Yeah.
that has nothing to do. It's not the same thing.
No,
It's,
no.
it's,
Yeah. It got bad too, where the police actually followed us, and I finally arrived at the volleyball game because she followed me. So then I had to call the police while I was on the phone because I don't know why she's following me. So the police show up. I'm in tears. My daughter is wondering what's going on. And the police came to me and said, you need to file a police report because you're not allowed to leave your vehicle and approach another vehicle. The minute she did that, she was wrong.
right.
I never filed the police report. And my kid said, "Why didn't you do that?" I said, "This is a woman that clearly was having a very bad day. No amount of a police report is going to make this any better." And so I just let it go and chose the forgiveness instead. So
Yeah.
you can see those two sides of that coin,
And
right?
it didn't ruin your rest of your day, even though I'm sure it was
No.
with you some until you were able to really set it down. But
Yeah, yeah,
it could have. I mean, you could have just like been out of time and space instead of focused on your daughter's volleyball game.
yeah. Or
And
I'm going to make her pay for what she did. So I'm filing that police
Mama,
report. I
so
want to see
get
her
you,
have
so
jail
help me.
time. Yeah, I could have done all of those things, but I could see it for what it was. This woman was probably having a very bad day, and
Or year.
it's better to just forgive and move
Yeah.
on, move past it. I also like to move past "I'm sorry." I don't love using "I'm sorry." I consider "I'm sorry" a drive-by emotion, which means when I bump into somebody at the grocery store, I say, "Oh, I'm sorry." "I'm sorry" has become this just instead of saying "excuse me," we use "I'm sorry" in place of "excuse me" all the time.
Ah, wow,
And
that's a
there's no
wake up.
right. And there's no energetic exchange with "I'm sorry." So if I say, "Mary, I'm so sorry," you just go,
Yeah,
"Okay."
it's okay.
It required nothing from
Yeah,
you, right? But if I say, "Mary, please forgive me," you have a choice
absolutely.
to forgive me or not forgive me. Now we have an energetic exchange that will impact us both. And I might follow up that "please forgive me" and "I forgive you too" if there was a mutual misunderstanding. Do you feel the energy when I
Yeah,
say that
it's
versus "I'm sorry"?
completely different. The shift is like awareness
Yeah,
as opposed to, like you say, a drive-by.
yeah,
Meh,
yeah.
yeah,
All right.
I
Instead of
love that.
telling yourself, "I'm so sorry, I did that," you say, "I forgive myself for doing that. I did the best I could with the resources I had at the time, but I forgive myself wholly and completely." Totally different than just saying, "I'm sorry for what I did."
That's very powerful. I'm going to
Yeah,
watch when I say I'm sorry a lot more.
yeah,
And not
yeah,
that I think that there's not a time for saying I'm sorry. Sometimes others just want to hear us say
yeah.
that I'm sorry.
Hmm.
But there's it's like an unended sentence with the three dots after it.
Yep.
It's like I'm sorry. I hope that you can forgive me because
Yes.
I know
Oh,
that's the
yeah.
energy that's blocking us.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And when you said that, you were perfect. "I'm sorry, then I hope you can forgive me." you
Yeah.
now give power to the other person to make that choice. And if they say, I do forgive you, they, they have to own that. They forgave you. Now, how do we move forward in a better space? Totally different vibration.
And if they bring it up again, chances are that they just said it as a byproduct. And
Yeah,
so that gives you another opportunity to step in and say,
yeah,
wow, I had really hoped that that was behind us.
yeah,
What can we do with that? And how can we move past this? And you just can continue the conversation. I think that's one of the things in our busy lives that we live now and how fast paced it is, and that we don't have time for a call. I can just shoot off a quick text and whatever it is.
right,
We
right.
oftentimes don't take time for the conversations that
Yeah,
heal. It's a
absolutely.
conversation that heals, not a quick text message. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't say it in 44 characters. I just, you really can't. And at least to the point where they can feel me. But we
Yeah,
are so
exactly.
adverse to picking up the phone nowadays. I'm as guilty as that as anyone. I would just rather, text it and quick and be done. But I haven't helped really move past the situation if I do that.
Yeah,
Sorry, I forgot to do this. Blah. But if
yeah,
I say the other, I hope you forgive me for not being there for
yeah,
you.
yeah, right.
That's brilliant, Candace.
Absolutely.
I love that. I'm going to
Yeah,
really put that into my life and use it.
thanks. You should. Forgiveness is healing. There is so much profound healing in just small acts of forgiveness, both for ourselves and for others.
Yeah.
Um, it sets you free.
So as we begin to wind down today, I'd like you kind of to dig deep. And I'd like you to think about, I have, I don't know, 85% women listening, and I have 15% diehard men, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And I'm so impressed that those men that come and listen. And sometimes I think, oh, maybe they've dropped off, and then they'll say something to me. I often see Kent White, and he goes, I really loved your podcast last week when you talked about this. I'm like, you're listening.
That's
And so,
awesome.
but when you think about the people who are actually listening and who have tuned in to with their hearts to hear what you have to say, what is the piece that you would like to leave with them today? What will be your ripple effect today?
Yeah. I think the biggest piece I would like to leave with listeners today is to live an empowered life, to live a life at cause or with intention, to live with your values and your integrity. Forgiveness has to be a piece of that. It has to be a major piece of that. I have seen more families, relationships, friendships, career relationships destroyed over a lack of forgiveness, and sometimes over very small things where there was no intent or an overreaction. Maybe there were some bigger things also, but I've seen so many people destroyed because they didn't have a forgiveness practice. And I would ask for you to look deep inside and say, forgiveness is for me. If nothing else, it will heal me and it will elevate me in my life. And it doesn't matter how someone receives that or if
Mm-hmm.
they receive it. Do it for yourself. That's what I'd like to leave.
One of my greatest pieces in my journey was when I was able to go back and connect with my mother who had passed away and just be able to say, I was never enough. You
Yeah.
always made me feel like I was just like shortchanging everything that you ever had thought that I should be or what I was capable of. And as I was saying this, I began to feel her and I began to see her and
Yeah.
how that was that was her
Yeah.
issue, that she wasn't enough. And so by pushing me to be more, then she could be more.
Right.
And when I began to see that piece, I could say, wow, Mom, I didn't know. You always seemed
Yeah.
so perfect because you were striving so hard to be perfect.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I forgive you. And I
Yeah.
forgive me. And it's that release that has allowed me to heal different generations and my generations that are alive and that will affect the generations to come.
Absolutely.
Forgiveness is not a small piece. It's
Mm-mm.
a
It's
huge
huge.
piece of this puzzle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for
And
those
you
of
made the
you,
perfect point. What I said earlier is when you start to look at other people and yourself, everyone does the best they can with the
yeah,
resources available at that time. So that's all your mom knew.
yeah,
That's all she knew. And hindsight's 2020. If she could go back and do it differently, or if she knew how much that hurt you, I venture to say your mom would have done something different. So to give that forgiveness and release, then now you can rebuild that relationship or memory with your mom in a much healthier way.
and
That
those were
helps you.
absolutely the words I felt from my mom. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. I hope you can forgive me.
Yeah.
And I did. And
I
when
love
I
that.
heard those exact words later from my daughter, I was
Powerful.
I was able to say, I'm so sorry. I hope you
Yeah.
can forgive me. I was doing my very best. That all I had at that moment. And
Yeah.
then for her to respond with, I know, Mom. I do forgive
Mm.
you. That's
I
powerful
love that.
generational stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Kandace, thank you for being here today. We've included your website on the end of this podcast that people can look and find you. And you can also find Kandace on Instagram under The Ripple Effect and follow her in all of her pieces of wisdom. What I love about you, Kandace, more than anybody else that I follow, is that you leave me with every post with this sense of peace and
Mm.
that I'm going to be okay. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
that.
No, thank you.
Mwah. Thank
Mm.
you for being here and thanking for helping all of us craft a more meaningful life and stepping in to the very best version that we can be. Until next time, have a glorious day. And remember that I see you. I truly see you. You are me, and I am you. Thanks for being here.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.